What's up, folks? I've run through Resident Evil Village enough times now to unlock all weapon upgrades and infinite ammo, so today we're going to focus solely on the gameplay in Resident Evil 8 relative to subsequent playthroughs and its replayability in general. Essentially, the first playthrough is survivor horror, and then the game transitions into an action FPS with an emphasis on speed. Each additional playthrough motivates you to max out a specific weapon and then complete enough challenges to acquire infinite ammo for it, thereby increasing your momentum as you race through to complete another run. Story-wise, I actually thought Capcom did a great job with the four lords, how each of them are unique characters that successfully draw from different aspects of either European folklore, with vampires and werewolves, or specific horror subgenres like psychological or transformative horror. However, after completing the game once, the story is inconsequential next to the gameplay. So let's quickly break down where the game succeeds and where it flounders after defeating Miranda for the first time. Starting with the village itself, it makes for a solid hub area connecting the different sections of the Lords, and returning to it after defeating each of the bosses to find new areas of it opened up is fine. I only wish the game allowed us to go after any of the four Lords at any time, instead of the fixed sequential order presented to us. I understand that would have required much more work from a development standpoint, but it would have made replayability exponentially better, especially if the final Lord you face acknowledged the desolation of the other three, similarly to what Heisenberg states when you enter the factory at the end of the game.
I didn't think you'd make it past Daughter Moreau, but I suppose you survived worse back in America,
Once you know each of the linear paths through the four primary areas of the game, and especially if you've managed to unlock infinite ammo for any of the weapons, you'll notice that the cadence for each of the areas roughly follows 15 to 20 minutes to reach the boss, followed by 10 minutes of returning to the village to acquire any new loot or items. Let's round that to roughly half an hour for each boss area. That totals up to 2 hours with some filler mixed in. The secondary or optional boss fights, and some of the out-of-the-way areas of the village towards the end of the game that take a few minutes to reach, resulting in approximately 3 hours of gameplay. Overall, only 50% of that, or about an hour and a half of that total time, is actually enjoyable from a replayability standpoint. The enjoyable sections are surviving the Lycan attack when you first arrive in the village. The waves of 30 some odd Lycans, along with the giant that appears, makes for great target practice with any of your fully maxed out weapons. The entirety of Lady D's castle. The way the cloaked zombie vampires lumber towards you makes them enjoyable to shoot at. It's just a shame this area is so short. The entirety of the stronghold is also excellent, as the seemingly endless waves of Lycans make for a decent challenge. Unfortunately, that's about the best hour and a half the game has to offer, as everything else, from a replayability standpoint, is a real slog. The section with the giant baby fetus monster should be skippable. No guns, no fun. Being chased across the water by Fishman Moreau is obnoxious. I understand why it can't really be skippable, but there is zero enjoyment in the experience after the first playthrough. I'm not a huge fan of the factory, although I will say it's well designed, and that I do agree with Mayo in what he said about the puzzle design in his review. The problem I have with the factory is just the aesthetics. I find it to be so visually unappealing compared to the rest of the game. From the zombies wearing Geordie LaForge's headpiece to the fact that it makes me feel like I'm suddenly playing Quake 4, that I can't help but feel the section is so tonally inconsistent compared to the rest of the game. I know Capcom was going for a modern take on Dr. Frankenstein here. I just feel like they missed the mark. Lastly, the section where you play as Chris right before the final boss should really be skippable as well. It'd be one thing if we were to be able to use our maxed out weapons for this area, but because we're limited to Chris's inventory, this becomes another mundane 20 minutes before facing off against Miranda. In summary, Resident Evil Village is fairly schizophrenic from a replayability standpoint. Like a waveform, it constantly transitions from peaks to valleys as you race through the story. Thankfully, the extremely short length of the game keeps the lows from being completely out of balance. While the gunplay is one of the highlights of the game, I really wish Capcom would add a dismemberment system if they're only going to give us such a small variety of enemy types. Generic enemies can be fine so long as the damage inflicted upon them is unique. Making the impact felt of each bullet would also heighten both the survival experience and the gore. Similarly, we're a year out from Doom Eternal illustrating a great way of conveying damage dealt without the use of a dismemberment system, but here in RE8, all we get are blood decals and headshots that only pop the heads from one enemy type. Because of this, the combat falls just short of being flawless. With that said, I'm still going to give Resident Evil Village a 7 out of 10. It's a great looking game with pretty decent replayability after completing it once, but the dichotomy of the survival horror aspect of the initial playthrough, mixed with more of a traditional action FPS experience of subsequent playthroughs, gives RE8 a bit of an identity crisis. It's not a terrible game at all, but I highly recommend waiting to pick this one up on sale. Hopefully the next installment of the series will give more weight to both the consequences of choice, along with more impact to the gunplay itself. If Capcom had done that here, it would have made for a hell of a game. If you made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed my content, then like and subscribe. Continuing to be constructive, what do you think Capcom could have done differently to improve the quality of the gameplay for Resident Evil Village? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and take it easy!